What is up, ladies and gentlemen, and today we're going to be doing a follow-up impressions video of Final Fantasy XVI. Now, what I really want to talk about here specifically is not just because of its gameplay mechanics, however, I want to talk about its magical systems. I'm really deeply interested in what this magical system does for Final Fantasy XVI. I'm really enjoying it so far. I have over maybe possibly 5 hours of this game. And, you know, what I really want to put in here, too, as well, I really love the design of its combat fluidity, its magic systems, and the way how the creatures are in terms of being them gargantuan. I really thoroughly think that Final Fantasy XVI is one of those games to where it's always going to be a interesting game to where it shows what it's doing, it knows what it's doing, and it does not have, for me, I did not have any problems with the game personally. I really haven't had anything so far because, like I said, I'm thoroughly impressed with this game. I'm enjoying it, so let's just dive right into this. Now, with the magical systems, I think when it comes to magical systems, especially from, like, you know, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning or like Skyrim or Oblivion, you know, those games were very intricate in their own magic design. But I think with the magic design with Final Fantasy XVI, it just does something that I never really was quite expecting. You know, it's very unique in its own unique way. And it has to do with the icons that you go up against, and you basically absorb their essence. And, you know, yesterday, if I remember correctly, I went up against Garuda. And I actually ended up finding out that she has 2 phases. And the first phase is that, you know, it was the bad chick. She had the Garuda icon, or the dominant. And so that was very interesting, but I love the way how it was designed. That design space of that creature, and along with the villain that actually has her as the icon, is very intricately well designed, and I love that. I think when it comes to video games, and specifically, you know, games are not always going to be well designed intricately or robustly like Final Fantasy XVI does. And that's where I feel like that where Final Fantasy XVI just does something very far from unique than from any other games to that type of ilk or that type of genre. So, you know, and yesterday I also ended up getting the Ifrit icon as well, or the dominant for Clive, and I used it quite a bit, you know, as the special ability, of course. But of course, you know, it's like when Clive goes up against the icon itself, the Ifrit icon itself, or the dominant, as it were, I found it very captivating. I found it interesting, and I love the way how it looked in a matter of retrospect, and the concept of it. And that's where I feel like that's where Final Fantasy XVI does something very unique on that. And I know I keep on repeating myself, so my apologies on that repetition there. But however, what I will say is that I think when it comes to a Final Fantasy game like this, you know, I have played Final Fantasy 15, and obviously that it's going to be a far more different type of game. But however, what I really love about Final Fantasy 16, it just does something that I never really was quite utilizing myself of understanding of what kind of game this was. And so it's like, you know, I love the combat systems. I think when it comes to combat systems especially, you know, I didn't really re-download Final Fantasy 15, but however, I remember the combat in that game, and it was pretty good. I wasn't, I would say, I was pretty impressed at the first 5-10 minutes of that, but however, I think when it comes to the combat in Final Fantasy 16, it's more fluid, it's not, I wouldn't say it's revolutionary, because they kind of borrowed from that of the Devil May Cry series. Capcom actually ended up hiring the person that did the combat in the Devil May Cry series, and I don't think a lot of people know that, so here you go. I thought I'd throw a little bit of knowledge in there for you. But now, however, I think when it comes to the combat fluidity, and along with by using the magical systems, you know, like with the Ifrit, or Garuda, or the Phoenix, you know, you can combine all those types of mechanics into one type of combat fluidity, And that's where I feel like that the combat in this game is so good. And I love that. Now, what I will say is that I'm really impressed with the icon abilities. You know, I'm actually using some of the Phoenix, some of the Ifrit, and some of the Garuda. But before I ended up getting the Ifrit abilities as well, by actually have to going up against the boss before I actually got his abilities, I used quite a bit of Phoenix and Garuda. And what I will say is that I really enjoyed the Phoenix's abilities. I think they're really, really cool. But what I really love about the Garuda abilities is the fact that it's very interesting enough that, you know, you have like an ability to where, I forgot what it was called, and I should have known better than that, so my apologies. But you're able to go into the fray and just like, you know, like go like Wolverine type of thing. And you have these giant fluorescent claws that you can go up against your enemies, and basically you're just like swap around every single time. And I think I love that. I think it's a really cool ability. But however, another thing that I really like about the Garuda icon abilities is that they have, there's an ability to where you can be able to launch your enemies very high up, and then, you know, it's the Cyclone ability, excuse me, so there you go. And you can be able to lift your enemies up, and then you can just constantly, you know, it can constantly, you know, obliterate your enemies in the airspace. And then I love that. I think that's a really cool style of game play to that sort of extent, and so that I think that's really cool. But I think after, I want to talk about here about getting the Ifrit, you know, or before getting the Ifrit. And so I really enjoy, I think when it comes to elemental abilities, especially in Final Fantasy 16, I really think that the Ifrit it's a very powerful abilities that you can use. And so, you know, much like the Phoenix, you know, because, you know, the Phoenix is just, you know, it's more, it is another part of the fire element, of course, but, you know, the Ifrit is another fire element as well. And that's where I feel like that, you know, this game, I mean, I know I have a lot going on more into this game, and I'm really looking forward to what this game will really give me in a matter of perspective and retrospect, in terms of not just of the gameplay mechanics, and not just because of its magical abilities and how you can utilize them in certain types of combat situations. It's just the fact that I love I just love the gameplay concept and the aspect of it, because I believe that's where this game really, really shines, in my personal opinion. I mean, because usually when we have games in general, the combat is not always going to be the clear focus. It's usually more on the lines of its story or the character progression. Now, that's one thing I really want to discuss here, though, too, while we get close to the end of this video, is that I love the story progression or the character progression in this game. I think Clive is definitely one of my favorite characters in this game so far, amongst with Jill, or, you know, like, other than, like, you know, the villains, as, like, you know, fighting against Garuda. But however, I think when it comes to character progression and along with the story progression, it's very deeply important, and that's where I feel like that's where the writing is very much very intricately designed, and, you know, it's the concept of it all, and that's where I feel like the Final Fantasy 16 is doing a really magnificent job of telling this story around the surrounding characters that you are playing as, you know, like Clive. But you're not playing as Sid, or you're not playing as Jill, but they are helping you along the way with your certain types of side quests, or the main story quest itself. And like I said, that's the most important. I think that's a really good way of it's really good solid design of going into that story design space, and I think it's phenomenal. And what I want to say is that I love the boss battles in this game so far. That's one thing I will greatly appreciate, and a lot of people should get to know that, you know, this game it's a little difficult, but what I will say is that it's a good difficulty challenge. And that's where I feel like that, where when it comes to games similar to that of Final Fantasy 16, it's just something that, like I said this before, but it was just something that I was not really quite expecting. And I think that's where I draw the line on when it comes to single-player campaign games like Final Fantasy 16 or like 15 or like Uncharted or any other kind of game that are part of that type of same genre of that action-adventure third-person perspective. And I think that's greatly, for me, it's very important because I love single-player games, and, you know, like I said before in a previous video, single-player games are not dead. That's where I believe that Final Fantasy 16 does a really good job of just utilizing its own uniqueness of its combat style, its magical systems, and how they just intertwine along together, and it just makes the game play more rewarding. And so what I will say is that I want to put this in real quick. I think when it comes to the boss battles so far in this game, I really think that my favorite one is when Clive finally turns into the Ifrit, along with the other one, and that's my favorite one in the early stages of this game so far. So I just want to put that in there real quick. But I will say right here is that I do highly recommend playing this game. You will not be disappointed. I'm not disappointed. It's worth well the $70 if you want to spend that much. But to much further ado, this is Jake from Citizen JV. I'll see you guys later. Peace.